Welcome to the NBAV podcast.
Welcome back to NBAV and the NBA Avenue podcast. Let's get right into last night's games. This is February 23rd, 2024. We're going to go through the games that happened on February 22nd. And going through all of these games, we're going to hit all of the relevant topics that we need to highlight from these games. So we'll go in order. We're going to hit the Golden State Warriors at the end with the Lakers. We're going to hit Dallas and their big victory over the Suns. We'll breeze right through this. Starting off with the Magic beating Cleveland 116-109. Now, this is a game where Donovan Mitchell didn't suit up. He didn't play for Cleveland. So obviously going to be tough for Cleveland to win games without their best player, without the catalyst to all of the victories that they've had this year, including the two massive win streaks that they went on in the 10 game range. So tough task for Cleveland. And it's part of a bigger lack of understanding where what happened to these players? How is Donovan Mitchell playing in the All-Star game and not suiting up for this game right now? And how did LeBron not suit up? Where are guys, Bradley Beal, where are these guys? How is the All-Star break not enough to get everybody healthy? It was a pretty significant time off for players who have been playing recently. So where were they? It's pretty unexpected to come back after the All-Star break and not see a full team, barring an Achilles or a broken leg or something that's a serious injury. So it's just something that I would like to understand a little bit better. But in this Magic victory, what you saw was the Magic wanted this victory so much more than Cleveland. And it's not that Cleveland didn't want it, but Orlando is clearly embracing the second half, this last third, let's call it, part of the season with a lot of vigor and intensity. They want this really, really bad. And the one who exemplified this more than any other player on the court was Mo Wagner in this game. You know how when you Google NBA and you look at the games that happened last night and they show pictures of one player from each team side by side, and you can click on it and you can watch a recap if you'd like? They usually pick whichever guys had the best game, right? So from Cleveland in this game, they put up Jarrett Allen. And on the Orlando side, they put up Franz Wagner. Franz Wagner scored 14 points in 32 minutes, but his brother, Mo Wagner, actually scored 22 points in 25 minutes. So he was scoring almost a point a minute. Incredibly, incredibly effective. He also added 7 rebounds to that, went to the foul line a bunch of times, and he wanted this so badly. The look of intensity on his face was something that, as a fan, you'd love to see. Mo Wagner wanted the victory so badly, and I think the Magic as a whole with Banchero, they all wanted this victory. So I understand Cleveland didn't have Mitchell, and Mitchell is their number one. But man, you just saw how badly the Magic wanted it. And if the Magic are going to continue to want it that bad, and they're going to bring this kind of intensity that they brought the whole year, and they just brought it up a notch, it's going to be tough on Miami. Now, why? Why is it going to be tough on Miami? Because the Magic just moved back in front of them by half a game, right? They were in a tie, but Miami didn't play last night. So with the victory, the Magic moved 1/2 game ahead of Miami with just one extra game played, and that game resulting in a victory. Now, the problem is, if the Magic are going to be consistent, and they're going to be consistently playing above 500 basketball, and the Magic are in 7, and the Heat are in 8, the Heat are trying to get to 6 because they don't want to play in the play-in game. They don't want to risk getting bounced from the playoffs in that play-in matchup. So Miami now has to get in front of Orlando, who seems to really be bringing it. But they also have to get in front of one other team to get up to 6 because they're currently sitting in 8. So conceivably, you can see the 76ers, who are only a few games ahead, sitting in the 5 seed, losing vast majority of their ball games for the rest of the year, and you can easily see the Sixers dropping into a play-in spot. Without Embiid, the Sixers are heavily lacking. We know that Maxey is going to bring a lot to the table, but when you look at the cast of characters around him, and I guess we're sort of bordering on just getting to that Knicks-Sixers matchup, so let's just head over to the Knicks-Sixers matchup where the Knicks beat the Sixers 110-96. The Sixers closed the gap a little bit late, but it wasn't enough to close the entire gap as the Knicks pulled ahead early on and stayed ahead for the entire night. And then it was very much on the back of a great performance from one of their recently acquired trade targets, and that's Bojan Bogdanovic. He scored 22 points in just 24 minutes of basketball. And there was a stretch where he hit 5 or 6 three-pointers in a row, and that was really his scoring for the night. And what's important for the Knicks is that they are missing a couple of key guys. They're missing OG on the defensive end and his three-point shooting, and they're missing Julius Randle, who provides a lot of the scoring. But the fact that you have a guy like Bogdanovic means something because he adds an added wrinkle. He adds an extra wrinkle to what you can do as a team, where he's not going to do this every night. He's not going to walk out onto the court every single game for the rest of the season and hit nearly all of his three-pointers and average almost a point per minute coming off the bench. But the fact that he can do that means that there's now another thing the defense has to try to take away. And this is a luxury that the Knicks have that the Sixers don't have. The Sixers have Maxey. And on a night where you didn't get very much from Tobias Harris, and you didn't get an incredible amount from Hield, it's going to be tough if you don't have the luxuries of having other guys who can really score the basketball. Kelly Oubre provides energy, defense, but he doesn't provide consistent scoring. So the Knicks, adding a couple of players at the deadline, they added something really key. Not that we expect Bogdanovic to do this consistently, but it is another guy who can go out there and get hot in games that matter. And that's in addition to Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo and Jalen Brunson. They also have Alec Burks. And when they really bring back Randall and when they really have Hartenstein playing big minutes and OG, that's going to round things out in a very nice way. And this is something that we also discussed with Dallas previously, where Dallas, and I know I'm skipping ahead to that Dallas Suns matchup, but where Dallas acquired a couple of players at the trade deadline, and when you look at what they gave up versus the players that they got, there were a lot of people who felt that they gave up too much for the players they got. The return wasn't that great. But what everyone was failing to see was that it's not as much about the player as it is about the upgrade over what you had and how much better these players make your team as a whole. Because you're not bringing a PJ Washington in to be a number 2 scorer behind LeBron James here. You don't need that big of an addition. But what you did do is you made your team a lot more athletic, and you made your team so much more deeper. You rounded out the entire roster. And now, where you're previously relying on Kleba and Dwight Powell to do a lot more for your team, suddenly you have this rotation of Lively and Gafford where you always have a big on the floor, and you have this big body in PJ Washington who goes up and defends Kevin Durant and defends the other team's best player pretty consistently. And these trade deadline moves can make a big difference, a lot bigger than you would think. So there you have the Knicks beating the Sixers in a game that the Knicks needed because they had lost 4 in a row. And you want to snap that because if it turns into too many, it starts factoring in. You think about the losing streak. It's nice to see that the Knicks are able to just end that, come out of the All-Star break and dominate a team that they're a lot better than in the free-falling 76ers. You also had the Raptors beating the Nets, and you had the Pacers beating the Pistons. And then getting to one of the marquee matchups of the night, perhaps the marquee matchup of the night, which was the Mavericks beating the Suns. And this was a Suns team that was playing without Bradley Beal. And you could tell me, well, hey, the Suns have played almost the entire season without Bradley Beal. He's only played in maybe, a quarter of their games tops? But the difference between having Bradley Beal and not having him is massive, because it's not just that they're missing another scorer. It's that look at the guys who are replacing him. Now, suddenly, you just upped the ante for how much you're expecting to get from Josh Okogie and from Nasir Little. And you become super reliant on Eric Gordon, who had not a terrible game for him last night. He scored 16 points. And this is an Eric Gordon who plays well about 25% of the time this season for Phoenix, at where Gordon is at in his career in the later stages. And Eric Gordon is a guy who the Suns are so heavily reliant on in games like this, where they're going against a team that's better than them. And I understand the Suns had the advantage in the standings over the Mavericks before this game was played, and now they've suddenly moved into a tie for the 6 and 7 seeds. But look at the rosters. The Suns don't have as good of a roster as Dallas. The top player on either team right now is Luka Doncic. Then I understand you have a couple of guys on the Suns. You have Durant and Booker. But the Suns are just a more top-heavy team, lacking a lot of that other talent around the edges, around the periphery, whereas Dallas just has a complete unit. Go through the Suns roster. Take a look at what happened in the game. Let's do that right now. You look at the Suns. It's KD, Devin Booker, and with Bradley Beal not being able to suit up, you now have Grayson Allen, Nurkic, who largely gets played off the floor in some of these matchups against a quicker team like Dallas. Eric Gordon, who played well last night, but he's not always going to be playing well. He only plays well a third to a quarter of the time. Royce O'Neal, and then you're relying on Okogie, Eubanks, Sabin Lee, Nasir Little, and then playing 1 minute each, you had Maladon and Roddy. So compare that, by contrast, to the Mavericks, where you have Luka, Kyrie, and then you have Tim Hardaway, Derek Jones Jr., Gafford, Jaden Hardy, Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleba, Derek Lively, PJ Washington, Josh Green. That's a complete roster. And they're even going to have other guys like Dante Exum, who they're going to have the luxury of just bringing Exum in for defensive possessions at the end of quarters or at the end of a ball game where you have timeouts, and you're going to, when you get the rebound off a miss, you're just going to call timeout and then take him out of the game on the offensive end. They're going to have the luxury of doing that because their roster is so well rounded out. But when you watch the Mavericks versus the Suns last night, you saw the Mavericks where they're led by Luka, but they have so many options. So you have Luka and Kyrie, but then you also have Hardaway, and you also have a couple of big bodies inside that Luka knows how to use very well, and Daniel Gafford, and PJ Washington, and Derek Lively, and they're able to get a lot towards the hoop, and then you have other shooters around them like Josh Green. So when you look at it that way, the Mavericks are able to play a complete team basketball game, whereas the Suns are required to do a lot more hero ball. And they're reliant on Devin Booker making incredible shots, Kevin Durant making tough shots, and sort of doing it on their own. I hate to say it, Phoenix Suns fans, but the Dallas Mavericks have a better team than you right now. Dallas is a better and more complete team. And if you think that Bradley Beal, come playoff time, is going to somehow manage to play in back-to-back 7-game series without missing games, you're just probably not thinking it through. When has he played that many games in a row, ever, at this point? That many meaningful games of basketball in a row for Bradley Beal? So you're going to be dealing with a much more shallow team going against better teams. And this was a massive victory for Dallas. It puts them in the driver's seat where they can now perform to the best of their abilities for the rest of the way, and they can move ahead of Phoenix. They can move ahead of Phoenix, stay in a top 6 seed, avoid the play-in, avoid all that nonsense, and really make a run at an NBA title. That is within their purview right now. Also, the Phoenix Suns are a better team at home, and this one was on the road. So the Suns, looking ahead, they typically do play better in the fourth quarter in their home building, and hopefully they have a lot more home games for the rest of the season because they're going to need it if they don't want to play any play-in games. Then we have the Clippers going against the Thunder, where the Thunder won 129-107, a pretty dominant victory for the Thunder. They just look like their usual selves. They were unfazed. They move a game and a half ahead of the Clippers. The Thunder have clamped back down on the 2 seed, 1 game back of the Timberwolves in the 1 seed. And you have Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, James Harden getting pulled from the game with a couple of minutes left. Ty Lue put the bench unit out there, and he said, this is it. Why did he do that? Why did he pull the big three off the court? Why did he pull the starters off the floor when there was still enough time to perhaps make a comeback in the game? And I would call it calculated risk. Like we said in the previous episode of NBAV, we highlighted that the goals for some of these teams for the rest of the way are a little bit different. We highlighted how the Thunder should try to win all their ball games because that's the phase that this team is in. We don't know what they're going to be able to do in the playoffs as this very young team when the whole ball game clamps down like it's the last 2 minutes of a ball game for the entire 40 to 48 minutes. Everything's going to be tighter. They're going to be game planned against very heavily, and they're going to try to take away Jalen Williams and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And they're going to be relying on Chet and Giddey and Dort and Isaiah Joe to really be big-time shot makers and shot creators in these playoff games. So we don't know what's going to happen for the Thunder. So what you want, if you're a Thunder fan, is you want to win the rest of your ball games in the regular season, continue doing what you've done. And then they'll get the valuable playoff experience. But for a team like the Clippers, that's not really a goal. The Clippers don't really care if they're the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5 seed in the playoffs. It doesn't really make a big difference to them because they've had players who have been there before. They have specifically Kawhi Leonard, who's won a couple of championships. They even have Russell Westbrook coming off the bench, who's played in NBA Finals before. He's played in many playoff games. And these guys are not in the same position as the Thunder. They can sit back, they can concede games. Over the next 26 games that they have, they're okay if they go 13-13. They're okay if they go 15-11. That's fine. They don't need to go 20-6 the rest of the way because they know what they have to do. So, a couple of minutes left to go. What's the most important thing for the Clippers? Are you going to really go all out and make this comeback 15 points down? Or maybe more importantly than that is to keep your stars healthy and gear up for the playoff run, because that's what this team is constituted for. We know what they can do if they make it to the playoffs. Their sights are on a championship, whereas for the Thunder, keep winning your regular season games because we're not really sure what you guys can do in the playoffs. So when the Thunder are in a position where they're down 10 or 15 points in the closing minutes of the ball games, yeah, leave your big dogs in there. Because this is a regular season team at this current phase. In the future, they will be a team that has championship aspirations. And I'm sure if you would ask them currently, they would still say that they have championship aspirations right now, but it's not realistic. Moving on, the Pelicans continue handling business against really bad teams. Let's see if we can pull up the Pelicans' last bunch of victories that they've had. If you look at the Pelicans' games, so they just beat the Rockets. Before that, they beat the Wizards. Before that, they beat the Grizzlies. Before that, they beat the Trailblazers. So the last 4 victories that the Pelicans had was against the Blazers, the Grizzlies, the Wizards, and the Rockets, 4 of the worst teams in the NBA. Before that, they had a couple of better victories. Oh, but sorry, before that they lost to the Lakers, and before that they beat the Clippers, and then they beat the Raptors, then they beat the Spurs, they beat the Rockets, and then they lost to the Celtics, they lost to the Bucks. So they are losing to some of the better teams. They had one good win against the Lakers in there, who are below the Pelicans in the standings anyway, but largely, the Pelicans have had the easiest schedule in the NBA over the last bunch of games, specifically over the last 4. And they've taken advantage of that, and you have to compliment them for handling business, not allowing yourself to be beat by teams that are worse than you, and that's how they've stayed in this 5th seed. Now let's look ahead at what the what the Pelicans have coming up in the next 4 or 5 games. Let's look at the Pelicans. The Pelicans are going to be going against the Heat, the Bulls, the Knicks, the Pacers again, the Raptors, the Sixers, the Hawks. So, not a murderer's row. You have games in there against the Raptors, the depleted Sixers, a couple against the Pacers, who are good, but they're in a similar position to the Pelicans. They're going to be playing the Bulls. Not a murderer's row, so you would think that based on the schedule over the next 5 or 6 games, the Pelicans should be able to stay approximately where they are at the 5 seed. So the Pelicans really have a golden opportunity where they can stay firmly in real playoff contention and hopefully not have to play any play-in games. They just can keep beating bad teams, and that should be enough for them coming down the stretch with the last 15, 20 games to go in the season. They'll be in a really good position. The Celtics handled business against the Bulls, beating them by 27. The Nuggets handled business against the Wizards, beating them by 20. And the Hornets kept their win streak going. This is their 4th win in a row. They are 4-0 since the trade deadline, since they acquired their new players. And what the Hornets are doing, which we've highlighted many times before, is right now they're playing for pride. They're playing to show that they belong in the NBA. Not the team, per se. We know the team is going to be there. But Grant Williams is trying to show that he belongs. Trey Mann is trying to show that he belongs. Vasilije Micic is trying to show that he belongs. Miles Bridges is showing that he has a really good 3-point stroke. And at the end of games, he's ready to be the closer. Brandon Miller is showing that he is going to try to live up to the expectations that everyone has for him, and that he's going to be the most notable player from that draft. The battle between him and Scoot, hey, it's not a battle. It goes to Brandon Miller. And the Hornets get to play free basketball. The Hornets, where they're currently sitting, if you're worried about them moving up too many spots in the standings, don't worry, because the team above them, the Raptors, are 5.5 games ahead of them. So it's going to be really difficult for the Hornets to even move up 1 spot in the standings. They're just going to go out there and try to play their best basketball and continue and see how many wins can we rack up in a row and how much joy can we bring to ourselves and our fans. That's what the Hornets are doing right now, and they're doing a great job of it. The Jazz, on the other hand, this is a dog-eat-dog league. One team wins 4 in a row. The other team, coming out of the trade deadline, they didn't acquire players. They gave up players, and they've lost 5 in a row. So Utah, going back down to purgatory. They have Markkanen. They have Sexton. But they don't have winning basketball right now over the last 5. The Lakers play without LeBron James, which we already discussed. And the Warriors, with Steph Curry coming out absolutely like a flamethrower, specifically in the first and second quarters, he was just unbelievable. Sometimes I watch him and I think this is the best he's looked in terms of his pure shooting ever. But then again, I've said that many times throughout his career, and he just seems to always raise the bar. The best show on television is still Steph Curry. Klay had a very bad night, but it was okay. The Warriors were able to easily beat the Lakers without LeBron playing. And this is my problem, where people think that Anthony Davis is a top 10 player in the league. If you're a top 10 player in the league, you need to have more of an impact as the number 1 guy. And it's pretty clear to me that Anthony Davis is never the number 1 on this team. It's always LeBron, no matter how old LeBron is. If you compare Anthony Davis to the other players who play the same position as him and have the same role on teams, that would be Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid. And where Joel Embiid has come up short in many playoff appearances, at the very least, if you are the number one on your team, that should amount to a very, very good regular season record. And Nikola Jokic guarantees you that. And Joel Embiid, in the games that he plays for your team when he is not injured, he guarantees a lot of victories in those regular season games. Now, you would also hope that those players would guarantee you success in the playoffs, which Jokic does. Embiid has yet to prove that. But both of those guys, in terms of the impact that they have on their team winning and losing on a nightly basis, it's a lot higher than Anthony Davis. And I would just expect more from him. That is, unless you're willing to concede that he's not one of the top 10 players in the NBA. Because if he's just, Defensive Player of the Year, if that is him, great rebounder, pretty reliable shot maker, but not really going to impact you as the number one player on your team in terms of winning and losing, I'm okay with that. My only problem is, are we overrating him in terms of what he can accomplish as the number one on a team? Because when LeBron doesn't play, they just got blown out by the Warriors, who haven't even had that great of a season. And this was really a much-needed victory for the Warriors because they were a game and a half back of the Lakers. Now they're only half a game back. And the Warriors have been pretty hot. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games, so they're heating up. And the Warriors still sitting in 10th. The Lakers still sitting in 9th, up half a game. Then you have the Kings at 8. And the Warriors and the Lakers are both trying to move out of this 10-9 spot where they don't want to have to play 2 play-in games in order to make it into the playoffs. They would like to cut that in half and have 2 shots to win 1 game. So the Lakers and the Warriors are in a war to try and move up to the 8th seed and catch the Sacramento Kings, who won last night. They had to get a victory against the Spurs, which isn't such a difficult thing. It was actually a pretty close game. But it's going to be really interesting to see. Let's see what the Warriors and the Lakers have in terms of the games coming up for both of these teams, and let's try to get a picture of which one has a better shot of staying in front of the other. The Warriors are going to be playing the Hornets, who are super hot, but you'd have to say that the Warriors in Golden State should be able to end the Hornets' win streak there. Then the Warriors are going to be facing the Denver Nuggets. Then the Warriors will face the Wizards, then the Knicks. And then the Raptors. And then the Celtics. And then the Bucks. So not too easy. The Warriors have the Hornets tonight. Then in 2 games after that, they'll face the Wizards. In 2 games after that, they'll face the Raptors. So there are some very winnable games in there. But then you'll also have the Nuggets, the Knicks, the Celtics, and the Bucks mixed in to all of those games. So they will have an opportunity to win about half their games if they play average basketball, and then if they play really well, we'll see if they can win more than half their games, but not a very forgiving schedule for Golden State. And conversely, let's look at what the Lakers have coming up in their next couple of games. The Lakers will be facing the Spurs, then the Suns, the Clippers, the Wizards, the Nuggets, the Thunder, the Kings, the Bucks, the Timberwolves, the Kings again, the Warriors. So an even tougher schedule for the Lakers, where the Lakers are going to have the next one against the Spurs, which is a must-win, because after that, Suns, Clippers, then they get an easy one against the Wizards, but then Nuggets, Thunder, Kings, Bucks, Timberwolves, Kings again. That's a murderer's row right there. So the Lakers, I would say, have, out of their next 8 games, 25% of them are easy. Whereas the Warriors, out of their 8 games, have 50% of them are easier matchups. So I would put the Warriors in the driver's seat right now, especially with LeBron not suiting up and who knows what's up with him. I would say the Warriors are in the driver's seat to move ahead of the Lakers and get into that 9th spot. The question for both of these teams is, can any of them get to the 8th spot? Because the difference between 10 and 9 isn't so impactful because you still have to play back-to-back play-in games in order to just get a spot in a real playoff series. Whereas if you can get to the 8th seed, you only have to win 1 out of 2 games. You don't have to win 2 games in a row in playoff atmosphere. You just got to win 1 of 2 potential playoff matchups, and then you can get yourself into a full series. So we'll see if either the Lakers or the Warriors can move up and capture the 8th seed from Sacramento, or any other team who drops. Like we said, the Kings won. They beat the Spurs, but largely unimpressive victory from the Kings. I'm really not a believer in what they have going on for them this season. And as for their last year, I was a big believer in them. But now I'm souring on Domantas Sabonis. I never truly understood what he brought to the table in terms of the full impact of games, but everyone seems to really like him. I put a tweet on Twitter just to try and gauge where the NBA audience is at with Sabonis, and I said, am I the only one who believes he is an overrated stat machine? And I only got one reply, which was yes. So yeah, people really seem to like Sabonis, but I'm okay being on an island by myself doubting him, because in the playoffs last year, he was one of the worst players on their team. He didn't do very much against Golden State. And if he would have done more, they probably would have beat Golden State, frankly. The difference between them winning and losing that playoff series, you can easily say it comes down to Sabonis, because Monk and Fox were unreal. Murray was really good. And they got some production from Barnes as well. So if you look at that series and you say, where was the lack of production? It was from Domantas Sabonis. So we'll see. This is going to be something that we continue to look at over time. Is Sabonis worth the money? And is he having a big impact for the Sacramento Kings? Nonetheless, they beat the Spurs last night in an easy matchup. Tonight you have the Raptors going against the Hawks. The Hawks got to win that game if they think that they're going anywhere this year. The Cavaliers are going to face off against the Sixers. Hopefully Donovan Mitchell plays in that game, but either way, the Cavaliers should have the upper hand on the Sixers, even in Philly, because the Sixers are in free fall. Without Joel Embiid, it's hard for them to win any games. The Heat are going to go face off against the Pelicans. This is a pretty good matchup. The Heat, this is their first game back after the All-Star break. So they have been looking at this matchup for a while, whereas a lot of teams played last night. Now the Pelicans have to go back-to-back on consecutive nights. The Heat get to come off the All-Star break and play this as their featured matchup. So I would look for the Heat to upset the Pelicans in New Orleans tonight. Then you have the Wizards going against the Thunder. Thunder should wipe the floor with them. And then you have the Clippers going to face the Grizzlies. Clippers just lost one. The Grizzlies are going to be playing hard tonight. Their first game back after the All-Star break. So look for it to be a little closer than you would imagine from Memphis here. Gigi Jackson, Jaren Jackson. But Clippers, at the end of the day, will probably get the victory. Then you have the Suns going against the Rockets. The Rockets are not looking very good right now. So the Suns, who need victories in order to stay competitive with Dallas for that 6-7 seed, the Suns should get the victory tonight, regardless of whether Bradley Beal plays or not. Then you have the Nuggets going against the Trailblazers. They should handle business. You have the Warriors going against the Hornets. It's going to be in Golden State. The Hornets are red hot, so this is going to be an awesome matchup. But I do see the Warriors edging out the victory because they're the better team, and they need it more. And they're very hot. They're 8-2 in their last 10. So we're going to give it to the Warriors at home in Golden State. And then you have the Bucks going against the Timberwolves. It's a tough one, but the Timberwolves play a lot better defense than the Bucks, and the Bucks haven't really shown that they've got it together up to this point. I think they will over the next 27 games, but will it start tonight? I don't know. You maybe want to take Minnesota seriously tonight against the Bucks in Minnesota. So maybe go with Minnesota over there. Then you have the Spurs going against the Lakers. Lakers should be able to get this victory. LeBron should hopefully come back, and the Lakers should get moving in the right direction and make this a competitive race between them and Golden State in the seeding. That's pretty much what we have for you today on NBAV. Follow us on NBAV and NB Avenue on social. Email the show at nbavenue@yahoo.com. That's nbavenue@yahoo.com. We're your source for a great time every time, and until next time, we are out.